Brambles Industrial is the latest company to use the payroll deduction scheme. Around 75 of its employees will give $1 or so a week to the service, the company to match each monthly amount. Today the first cheque was handed over. The contribution should top more than $10,000 a year.
I think most things these days are coming back to a user pay situation, and particularly with something like this, it's a very expensive thing to run, and I think the users must pay in this case.
Brambles join more than 50 other companies who make up around 20% of the helicopter's total income. Could the chopper have survived over the years without the contribution of these companies?
Very difficult to have survived, yes, because it's long term. You see, it comes in, regular, and you see the maintenance of the aircraft is something that has to be done quite regular.
And this is what all that generosity will buy. The new rescue helicopter was loaded onto a ship in Japan last Wednesday. It will arrive in Brisbane on Saturday.
It's got to come onto the Australian register. CAA will do some inspections. Some slight modifications might have to then be done, but then the medical configuration will come into it, and that's where a lot of the expenses that we're now budgeting for occur.
The helicopter should be in Newcastle late July or early August.
Newcastle University Classics lecturer Godfrey Tanner is still sporting a black and swollen eye after he and two female students were assaulted by a young man at the Ourimbah railway station.
So I was very angry and I pursued him in a minute, so I came to a bit, and I called out, "You young swine."
The station is about half a kilometre from the university's Ourimbah campus. After evening lectures, students have to walk along a dark road to a station unmanned after 1:30 in the afternoon.
Ourimbah isn't that unsavoury part of the world, it's just that it's so isolated and you could scream till you're blue in the face and nobody would hear you.
Since the assault, university members have been calling for better security at the station. Colin Cowell from City Rail says with Ourimbah servicing only about 200 passengers a day, the authorities simply can't justify manning the station full time.
It's a security risk for the whole community. This is a mad policy of unmanned stations.
City Rail is looking at installing closed-circuit cameras at the station, but in the meantime the university is taking the question of security into its own hands.
The immediate steps that we need to take are to use our own internal security staff to provide a better surveillance of that area.
Scott Bevan, NBN News. With more than 3,000 entrants in this year's Taree and District of Stedford, the 60 young finalists chosen to perform in last night's finale really had something to sing about. From tutus to tiny tots, the level of performance, according to organisers, was very high.
The creme de la creme of the last 5 weeks. It's a little touch of spring in winter.
About 500 people attended the concert at the Manning Entertainment Centre.
A shot at the top job has been a long time coming for John Jenkins. He was pipped at the post 2 years ago by Doug Carley. However, last month Mr Carley resigned following controversy over his absence from council meetings, ill health and a final vote of no confidence.
In my experience is without precedent. There's been nothing like this ever before, and I hope I never see it ever again.
Alderman Jenkins defeated Deputy Mayor Laurie Manning by 116 to 67 votes for party pre-selection. A number of other candidates have thrown their hats into the ring for job as mayor. Nominations close later this month. The ALP will also contest the by-election for Ward 2.
The ALP is there to serve its community. We've got a responsibility. If we can't do that, we shouldn't be there, and that goes for anyone else involved in government. You've got to look after the interests of those that put you there, and that's the community.
With 40 seconds to go and staring at another loss, Dwayne McLean was desperate, and his desperation paid off with an intercept. With scores now level, a sense of urgency kept the Falcons pressuring the basket until Everett Stevens drew the foul. Playing like a cool professional, he didn't disappoint. Suddenly, the Sydney crowd went quiet, but the game wasn't over until Ken McClary intentionally took out Michael Johnson. The captain had only scored 7 points for the game. Now he had the chance to put the game beyond doubt, and he casually lobbed in 2 free throws. And Everett Stevens got the pleasure of putting the icing on the cake. The win pushes the Falcons closer to the top of the ladder again. The Kings, on the other hand, are already talking about next year.
It's been a long and involved process for Commissioner Bill Scales and Inquiry Manager Philip Hagan, who visited BHP today. They've travelled the country speaking with employers, unions, doctors and injured workers about compensation and rehabilitation after accidents in the workplace. A report will be presented to both federal and state governments by early August, outlining various recommendations.
Most people have argued that there's a need for improvement. People are arguing there needs to be different incentives to encourage employers to put in better safety within firms. There are employers, of course, are arguing there needs to be greater incentives for employees to get back to work.
Representing the Hunter Action Group Against Work Cover, Mark Stoker expects hundreds of concerned workers to attend a public meeting at the Maitland Leagues Club tonight.
Have the opportunity to relate their experiences with insurance companies, with doctors, with a whole range of people that has an impact on their jobs and their lives.
Meanwhile, the Commonwealth Rehabilitation Service officially opened its office at Charlestown today. One of 3 located in the Hunter, the service aims at helping those with disabilities re-enter or enter the workforce. After a 3-month training program, it's a scheme that not only benefits participants who may land a permanent job.
The employer has a skilled person for up to 3 months who is still being supported by the government, and then they're able to move into a position. So they've got a trained worker as soon as they start the job, basically. So there's a training for them that they wouldn't normally get with clients.
This sign, built by mayoral candidate Alderman Mark Booth, is what's caused all the trouble. A resident took offence to it and complained to council. Initially, Alderman Booth refused to move the sign, which sat outside his blacksmith's automotive business. But after a council ordnance officer inspected the sign today and found it to be in breach of some local government regulations, Alderman Booth moved it inside. Despite this hiccup, Mr Booth has vowed to push on with his campaign. He believes the council's reputation has been severely dented by the circumstances surrounding the controversial resignation of former Mayor Doug Carley.
The image is low, the morale is low within council, and the residents of the city certainly don't have a good view of the happenings within council. And we need to turn that around. We need to restore that integrity.
Yesterday, the ALP announced Alderman John Jenkins as their preferred candidate for the mayoral election. Nominations for the top job open on Wednesday, with the mayoral election scheduled for July 24th. Catherine Lamond, NBN News.
NBN News reported last month that Lake Macquarie Council was considering prosecuting Hunter Water over the spill, which occurred in December last year. Last night, Aldermen voted overwhelmingly to go ahead with legal action, despite a report from its Environment Department which recommended that none be taken.
There were figures of 3 to 5 years wait before anything could be done. It's too late. I've had repercussions from that from residents since I've got into council about the problem with overflow of sewage. We just can't put up with it any longer.
Alderman Mercia Buck instigated last night's motion. She believes the Water Corporation must be made to pay for the incident in which raw sewage was allowed to flow out of this manhole and into South Creek for 4.5 hours. She's also angry that instead of pumping the waste into tankers, the corporation used a portable pump to empty the contents of the Warners Bay station into the creek.
The actions of the Hunter Water Corporation in controlling that were, I feel, despicable, because the wrong thing, they let it continue, and then they actually came out and pumped it out, their pumping station there.
It's not the first time the Warners Bay station has overflowed into the creek. Signs continually warn of the problem. If the Water Corporation is found guilty of breaching the Clean Waters Act, it could face a maximum fine of $1 million.
Dudley Bluff, just south of Newcastle, is a popular fishing area. But a 36-year-old skin diver was caught in trouble early this afternoon, jumping into shallow water, breaking his ankle. A friend climbed the cliff face for help, ambulance officers deciding the region was too steep to carry him out. The Westpac Lifesaver chopper was called in to help. As paramedics were winched down to the man, the chopper hovered in tricky winds against the cliff. Within minutes he was on board and transported to John Hunter Hospital. Peter Ryan, NBN News.
It's the first time this year that selectors have named the same side for 2 consecutive games. In past weeks, it's been chopped and changed through injury or poor form. Captain Michael Hagan has recovered from a back injury and will become the first player to rack up 100 consecutive games for the club.
Yeah, it's a bit of a milestone, something we're looking forward to against the old club too.
Adrian Brunker has been named on the reserves bench but must face a medical later in the week on his injured knee. If Brunker is cleared, he and Tony Kemp could be interchanged. Kemp has renewed enthusiasm after being named in the New Zealand Test team.
It's the ultimate playing for your country, and that black and white jumper is something special to me, and it will be, I hope, for another few years.
And seen nipping sprightly around the ground today, Mark Sargent. Out of plaster, Sarge expects to be back on the field in 4 weeks, nearly 3 months after he injured his ankle.
Leicester sides, wins all our games up to then. We're still in the running for the semi-finals. There's not going to be, much left for me to prove other than to get back on the field and try and get back into first grade.
The make-up of this week's side, though, is O'Davis, Godden, Kemp, Hagan, Ainscoe, Matthew Johns, Martin, Glanville, Harrigan, Boyd, Butterfield, McCormack and Howe.
Toronto knew a win would mean a position in the 5 and there were no backward steps. But North Nelson Bay kept running the ball, the centre making a bust up the middle for Steve Villette to score under the posts. The Scorpions dominated but still squandered scoring chances. The final score could have been much higher, Toronto winning 28-6. At Charlestown, Cessnock was too strong for the Central Charlestown Butcher Boys. Fullback Mick Clark running amok. Slam and Sam Stewart was into the heavy stuff, but Cessnock was far too good, taking the game 24-12.
We didn't get it. Look at Pattern Tree.
No sooner had Senator Bob McMullen arrived at Newcastle Customs House than he was being given a local history lesson. It was history that partly brought the Administrative Services Minister to town to inspect the $3.8 million restoration of the 116-year-old Customs House.
The people who've worked on the restoration, the architects, the designers, the tradespeople have done a magnificent job. And I think it's an important part of Newcastle's history, the region and the nation's history.
Senator McMullen unveiled a plaque commemorating the completion of the project. The task has begun this week to work out who will use the building and for what purpose.
Well, there's important decisions to be made, but we've tried to keep that separate. We've called for submissions about that. They've been received, and that's the next job.
Well, you can't get over the fact that it's the Customs House. The Customs ought to be here. But if that can't be, well, I'd like some sort of semi-public use.
With pens and paper and a pooling of ideas, about 25 representatives from Newcastle City Council, business and community groups spent the day mapping out how they believe the future CBD should look. The workshop was set up by a council consultant to canvass public opinion about what is needed to connect the Honeysuckle redevelopment project with the traditional heart of Newcastle.
The connection's important because we're developing a new economic engine for Newcastle, if you like, which is called Honeysuckle, and to gain the benefit of that growth and reflect it in the performance of the traditional heart of the city.
In the Honeysuckle project's development, the question of whether the rail line should stay or go has been dividing both plans and opinions. But Mike Cullen is taking a middle line with the railway in formulating links between Honeysuckle and the city.
In the short term, the rail is likely to stay, so we'll be considering that position. And in the long term, there's some desire to see it go, so we'll be considering that as well.
Scott Bevan, NBN News.
That's right. Well, if I do it.
This is the same as the vehicle stolen, a Subaru RS Turbo. With 147 kilowatts under the bonnet, it accelerates to 100 kilometres an hour in just over 6 seconds and has a top speed of 230 kilometres an hour, making it what could be an ideal getaway car. In the early hours of this morning, thieves hit this Newcastle showroom. After slacking a security chain, they planned to steal the station wagon and make an easy escape by moving another vehicle parked outside. When this failed, they tried another plan.
Then they've decided to go down the back here and move the cars out of the way and bring the car straight through and go through this door here.
Although 6 vehicles were damaged, no others were stolen. Dealer Rod Williamson believes the bandits knew exactly what they were after.
If the thieves had something to do specific, it would probably be a very, very difficult vehicle for the police to catch. Probably their only chance would be a helicopter. They would never outrun that car, and it has much better traction and road holding than any of the police cars.
Fingerprints have been taken and security measures tightened.
We'll do whatever we can do to stop it, but if they really want it, most of the time they get what they want, don't they?
Melinda Smith, NBN News.
Until the building of this $11 million facility at Port Waratah, freight rail wagons have been serviced in sheds designed in the age of steam. But outdated machinery has now been replaced by the latest technology and what State Rail calls a one-spot maintenance facility.
This is the most modern wagon maintenance facility in Australia. This has got the latest equipment to facilitate wagon maintenance.
A new industrial relations agreement has also been ironed out, with 30 employee classifications now stripped down to just 1.
The productivity has improved by 730%. Now, there's a few places around the world you would get that increase with a new facility.
Each day up to 30 of the fleet's 3,500 wagons can be serviced at the centre, and Mr Baird says that kind of efficiency means better service in freighting hunter coal from the pit to the port.
With this maintenance facility, it means that we are able to offer competitive prices to the coal industry.
While today's official opening represented a new era for wagon maintenance in the Hunter, it was the end of another for Freight Rail's Northern Manager, Bruce Hall. He's being transferred to Sydney to become the authority's General Manager of Projects after 4 years in Newcastle. Scott Bevan, NBN News.
It was during yesterday's huge swells that the Coast Guard vessel struck trouble. Called out to help two surfers in difficulty near Swansea Heads, the Coolamar found itself in strife after being hit by huge waves that cut both motors. When a crewman was washed overboard, skipper Rob Steenson was left helpless, unable to steer the vessel to shore. No one was seriously injured in the ordeal, and although a little shaken and bruised, he believes his actions were justified.
The circumstances at the time were such that I felt that we could handle it, and that's why I made the decision. And I think probably I would have done it again, or I would do it again, yes.
Today, Flotilla Commander Mick King inspected the damage of the partly insured vessel, estimated at around $60,000. He says the impact of the waves caused extensive hull cracking and valuable rescue equipment was damaged or lost overboard. An investigation has begun into the incident, and although forced to look for a replacement vessel, it's business as usual for the Volunteer Coast Guard.
Fortunately, we have members vessels which are Coast Guard accredited vessels that's been inspected up to the Coast Guard specs, and we'll be using those until such time we get a replacement vessel.
Melinda Smith, NBN News.
Robert Rivera today got his first look at the style of Kostya Zoo. Rivera and his trainer came to Australia, aware that the Russian had a good punch, but the 23-year-old's speed caught them by surprise. However, they think they've spotted a weak point.
He can punch hard, you know, but I think to me he's completely open. You know, he doesn't have a defense.
Rivera says he can't understand the awe that Kostya is held in.
People see what he's done and they think he's going to do that to every opponent, you know, but I'm not an opponent. I came here to win this fight.
Kostya prefers to leave the hype to the Americans and says he will do the work on Friday night.
I show him my defense in the ring. If he doesn't see defense, it's his mistake again.
Despite knocking his opponent out in less than one round, Kostya still has the look of hunger.
If he boxer, he not scared, but he should be worried a little bit.
For the next 2 days, Johnny Lewis wants Kostya to continue with the speed work.
Kostya's preparation for this fight is definitely low-key. The only grand plans that he has is to get on with this one and get a crack at a world title in a few weeks' time.
He says he doesn't mind if the fight goes more than a round this time because he wants to show the crowd what he can do. Darren Curtis, NBN News.
Whitebridge and the green and white strip were hot favourites to win, with only 2 changes to the side that came 5th in the state championships last year. Alison Sharp was on target in goal attack, Trudy Franks powerful at the back. Both teams brought with them an instant crowd for support. Angela Mitchell played soundly for Warners Bay, but Whitebridge was too good, winning 30-19. Both teams will play in the state championships in Sydney on Monday.
A presentation of some wonderful flowers. Places.
Good job, well done. You want to say one more thing? Sure.
I just like to say thanks.
Congratulations, Lisa. And also to...
Yeah, that's a breaky, didn't you, Gabrielle? Very cool.
I'm tired.
Hang on, Tim. Ready? Whee!
On Friday night, the Newcastle Workers' Club auditorium will be transformed from this to this. This is the final rehearsal for Icon, perhaps the most ambitious fashion spectacular to be mounted in the Hunter.
Hold it on. You got a bit more. Go again. You can hear it.
All right.
Centaur is an exhibition by 8 fibre art students from the university. They're third-year students, and they chose the name Centaur because it means sensitive and the power of sensation. It's the Latin word, and this is their exhibition. The materials they've used range from glass, latex, fibre, muslin. It's a very exciting exhibition. The other exhibition is a curated exhibition, and there's wrapping involved in each piece of work in there. The third exhibition, and that's James Rasmussen's Lucid Obscurities, which is a photographic exhibition. Small photographs of the landscape. They appear of the landscape, and yet are they of the landscape?